If you're a B2B founder, one of the biggest challenges that you have to figure out is how you can actually grow even when the economic conditions around you are crashing. How do you actually do that? That's what we're going to cover in this conversation. And I'm going to go through 4 examples of how I was able to take different businesses, build their go to market engines on the fly, and grow through some of the most severe downturns that we've seen in our lifetimes. Now, quick disclaimer, this isn't going to be a growth hack conversation. The things that I talk about on this channel have nothing to do with growth hacks. So if you're looking for quick fixes or magic buttons and stuff like that, that's not what I talk about. What I do talk about is how you can actually build a cohesive go-to-market engine that aligns your marketing, sales, partnerships, community, and content engines all together so that you are unified going to market. You get tight integration with your customers, and you have your customers lead the way when it comes to crafting your messaging and how you show up in the marketplace. I've done this for years. Whether we're talking about growing through the housing crash, whether we're talking about growing through recoveries, whether we're talking about growing through the pandemic, or even today, where we're in the midst of another economic downturn, I've been working side by side with founders on how to build the engines that give you resilience and the ability to meet your customers where they are, regardless of economic conditions, and build healthy pipelines that eventually get you to traction. So let's get into it. So how was I able to accomplish that and help these organizations navigate economic downturns and still continue their growth? The answer is actually really simple, but extremely difficult to execute. The TLDR is that the reason why I was able to consistently help these organizations grow through these downturns is because I was customer obsessed. And a lot of people say that they're customer obsessed, but in the end, all they are obsessed about is driving their own pocketbooks and their own bottom line. So they go to market the same way that everybody else does. It's the spam your TAM method. It's beating your market into submission through superior volume. And I was never that sort of seller. So how do you actually operationalize buyer centricity and customer centricity as a way to build a strong foundation in your business so that it's effectively recession-proof? And I'll give you 4 examples. We're going to talk about a company that I helped in the construction tech sector. I'm going to give you 2 examples of how I did this in staffing. And then I'm going to give you an example of how I actually did this in an HR tech organization that eventually pivoted into ed tech. Everybody remembers the housing crash. It was the worst economic downturn that we had seen at this point. During that time, I was working for a construction tech company. And specifically, that company had a tech platform that they were offering to the architects, engineering, and contractor community. That platform was the infrastructure for a lot of local print shops. And we were able to grow through that housing crash where print shops had their primary customers being architects, engineers, and contractors. When the housing market crashed, their business effectively dried up. So what did we do to grow our construction tech business and help print shops grow their businesses? Well, one of the first things that we did is that we took a deep dive in understanding how print shops actually did business and what their business model looked like. And when we understood their business process and how they actually acquire customers, everything clicked for us. The product that we actually delivered to the market was very similar to how we interact with Amazon today. So the message to the print shops was that you need to operate, and remember, this is during the housing crash, so Amazon wasn't Amazon during that time. But our message was you need to take the approach that Amazon or iTunes does and apply it to your business, which will actually give you broader reach to your customers. So rather than your customers being limited to a geographic region and doing business with you, what we do is provide you a platform that allows you to access more customers. Now, we were able to grow as a company by engaging with our customers, understanding their businesses, and then driving a solution to them that helped them acquire customers at a broader, larger scale than they originally were able to. But the other way that we actually were able to grow through that housing crash was because we partnered with those local print shops and taught them how to be more effective as sellers and go to market in a very similar way that we went to market. So how did we actually go to market? The way we actually went to market was something that was built off of Chet Holmes's Ultimate Selling Machine. We read that book, we got all of the materials that we could find about that process, and then we applied it to our outbound motion. It's a very early prototype of what I do now. But the key point of how that was leveraged is that we focused on driving education and partnerships and innovation into our customer spaces, which allowed them to be more effective as business owners. And the end result was that because we took a buyer-centric approach, because we led into the market with education and knowledge share and business expertise, we're able to take a company that was a 40 customer organization when I joined and move it to roughly a 300 customer organization. And we opened 2 brand new markets, one in Canada and one in Malaysia. And the central philosophy that we used was to drive outbound into the marketplace, not on a product or problem focused approach. We drove our outbound leveraging content as the attraction engine that brought all of these buyers into our ecosystem in a very no pressure, low pressure way. What we did at that time was a completely different way to go to market. And instead of trying to carpet bomb our entire available customer landscape, we took a precision approach and focused on educating first and sharing business expertise first. And that made all the difference in the world. But it was built on understanding what was happening with our customers and how their customers interacted with them and how we could help them be more effective in bringing their customers into their ecosystem. The TLDR of all of that is that we took the time to understand what they were going through first and understand what their customers were going through first before we ever presented a solution to them. So that was during the housing crash. So after hearing about what we did in the construction tech space, what are your thoughts about it? How does that resonate with you? Drop me a comment and let me know what you think. And if you have a question about something that you're stuck on, leave that in the comments as well, and I'll go ahead and answer that. So after my time in the construction tech space, I've made a pivot into the staffing space and specifically IT staffing. Never had been in that space before. And if you're talking about a selling process, the selling process in staffing is completely different than the selling process in construction tech. Staffing is traditionally very transactional, and it is the literal definition of trying to spam your TAM. It's smile and dial. It's constantly being on the phones trying to get in front of somebody in a very transactional way. And for all of the messaging that you might hear that the industry prides itself on relationships, it's basically a smile and dial factory. Every staffing company that I've seen, their metrics are based on just raw outbound activity and reliance on basic conversion ratios to get you to your ultimate number. So it's a space that I'd never been in before. It's an industry that I don't know. And it's a smile and dial factory, which at the time I could do, but I didn't realize until I was in the thick of it that this is not an effective way to sell. So during my time in staffing, this was at the recovery phase post housing crash. But during that time, the entire IT market was cratered. There were no IT positions, no companies that were hiring. And I was given a market and territory that had underperformed for years before I got there. And before I got there, I was in a company that really didn't have the ability to go ahead and get new customers in the doors. So my mandate in that organization was to go and revitalize or turn around this territory and bring in new customers. So I tried the smile and dial bit for a while, and it just didn't work. And it didn't work because mainly the messaging and why buyers buy from us was not well defined. There was nothing that differentiated our company from any other company in any real way. So I decided to go a different route. And what I focused on was connecting with those senior and executive level buyers within IT on a business level versus a transactional level. Now, at that time, I had both my master's degrees and I was working on wrapping up my doctorate as well in organizational leadership. So I focused on leveraging what I knew in those spaces and having a different business conversation and understanding their core business problems as a way to build the relationship first and use that later as a springboard into more of a commercial conversation. So what were the results of that? And again, when you hear all of that, the simplified version of it is, instead of trying to push a solution onto them, I actually slowed down my approach and focused on having business conversations on what was going on within their organizations, what were the challenges that they were having in terms of their overall employee landscape, what were the big factors that were driving turnover within their organizations, what were the bottlenecks in their hiring process, what were the bottlenecks on their retention process, and what actually drove them out of their minds when it came to dealing with companies like the one that I was working at. So by having those conversations, and there was a content layer that I had on the back end of that, because this was all going to be feeding elements of research that I had going on for my doctoral process as well. So that gave me an in, and it allowed me to have a different level of conversation so I could actually understand what was going on in the customer world. This is actually another way that you execute not only content as a lever to open doors, but also using buyer centricity and the customer voice to inform how you actually show up. So by doing that, I was able to access a lot more conversations and a lot more meetings than the typical staffing person. And what were the results? So the results speak for themselves. In the Chicago market, where there are literally hundreds of staffing firms, and in my company where the growth trajectory of most reps within that organization was on growth of existing accounts, in 18 months, in an industry that I was not familiar with, I was able to come in using that approach and bring in 18 new customers in 27 months, which were more new clients added during that time frame than all of my peers put together. So again, the lesson here is that when you take the time to be buyer-centric and understand the customer world, you're going to be armed with a lot more information that's going to allow you to go to market more effectively. You operate with your customer voice and you leverage what you learn from those conversations and how you package a potential solution to them. So again, by being buyer-centric, it allowed me to get traction in a way that was completely different than what the quote unquote existing playbook allowed. So those are two examples of how you actually use buyer centricity and customer centricity as a way to build a foundation of your outbound, your GTM, that allows your understanding of that buyer's world and the buyer's problem to be more effective in how you go outbound and generate results. A third example of growing through downturns happened at another staffing organization that I was at. Now, this was a complete 0 to 1 build out. So I actually partnered with an SIA top 100 staffing firm, and I came onto their organization to build out the Milwaukee market. And again, this was in IT staffing. So I had already known how that sector works from my previous experience, and I wanted the opportunity to build a market from the ground up. So I joined this organization and I leveraged a content-led approach, and I modified what I was doing at the construction tech company to apply to staffing based on what I had learned. So where this approach was different was that it was much more refined in terms of how I leverage content. And I also leveraged the fact that a lot of the senior and executive level leaders that I would be talking to had interest in building out really high performing teams. So I leveraged not only what I had known from my previous staffing experience, but I also leveraged the stuff that I had put together when I wrapped up my dissertation on organizational effectiveness, leadership, retention, and turnover as a way to open the doors to have those conversations. And most of my conversations in those spaces had to do with employee attraction and retention, which were critical for IT leaders of these organizations. And it was critical because it was a competitive IT talent landscape. So that allowed me to open a lot more doors than a traditional staffing person would be able to open. So that set the foundation of relationships going forward. And then as I was building traction and growing in the market, I was already growing at a high level because we're starting from zero. The pandemic hit. And while all of the staffing organizations around the country were falling over just because demand cratered and layoffs were all over the place, I was actually able to grow that business by triple digits from top line and bottom line revenue through the pandemic, never had to fire anybody on the strength of the conversations that I had early on and by leveraging some of those content components to sustain the relationship as we went through. Now, that formula in that experience helped me grow that organization from 0 clients and 0 revenue to an 8 million ARR business. So again, another example of being buyer-centric, talking about business problems, understanding what's important to the buyer and leveraging that as a key differentiator in an undifferentiated market allowed me to grow at that level. And the lesson in that experience, as well as all the other ones, is that if you take the time to understand the business problems that is unique to each of those customers and each of those potential prospects, it will often lead you to a place where you can provide a unique solution to them that your competitors can't. So those are 3 examples so far. What do you think? How could you apply what I've talked about when it comes to buyer centricity and understanding business problems and leveraging that as a way to differentiate yourself from everybody else, as a way to recession-proof your business and build a foundation of trust that you can grow from? What about the conversation so far stands out to you? Drop those in the comments. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you drop me a follow. And that way you never miss out on any of the future episodes that I'll have coming out. Now, the 4th example that I'll give you has to do with an HR tech company that was based in Singapore that I helped establish a footprint in the US. Now, the HR tech company in Singapore had an established customer base in that market. They wanted to expand into the US. In the US, there were no customers, no brand recognition, no springboards that allowed for an easy transition into the marketplace. So we had to build everything from the ground up. So it was another 0 to 1 build, building from nothing. So our product theory going into the market was that we would target the same type of customers and niches in the HR tech space in Asia here, and that would be our formula for building traction. We had some baseline information that was pulled from our existing customers in the Asian market, and we made a market hypothesis and leveraged that to build a content engine that would allow us to get in front of any of those buyers that we needed to get in front of. And we were very effective in getting in front of those people. But what we learned in the process of doing that was that this was a segment and space that was saturated. And we eventually ended up, because of the learnings from our content and our content engine and our conversations, we were able to land in the ed tech space, and we were able to pivot the product into ed tech and allowed us to go from 0 customers in the US to roughly 25 customers in the US on the strength of the multiple conversations that we had, thanks to a niche specific podcast, which we had embedded into our outbound motion and allowed us enough conversations to pivot into a space once we got our first win. Those are 4 examples of how buyer centricity and being customer obsessed and understanding their businesses across sectors and layering in content as a key element of your outbound allows you to have conversations regardless of economic conditions, which actually helps you set the foundation of trust that you need to build successful businesses from. So in those 4 examples, you have different businesses, different sectors, different niches, different personas. But because I was consistent in focusing on understanding the buyer world and leveraging content to have those conversations and build trust first and build relationships first, it allowed me to leverage those down the line while competitors in the marketplace relied on the same old playbooks that relied on massive outbound efforts to get a small slice of the conversation. When you think about how to grow your business and recession-proof it in a way where you'll always have a full funnel of conversations and keeps your pipeline healthy, this is how you do it. By delaying the transactional aspects of your business and by delaying the emphasis on sales right now, it actually sets you apart from any other person that's in the marketplace, and it roots you in a place where you're learning about that customer's world and that customer experience, and it allows you to do a lot more than just sell a product. I'd be curious to see how you would apply what I talked about in your businesses today. If you want to get into the weeds and understand the nuts and bolts of how you actually do this, use my booking link so we can set up a strategy call. And if nothing else, if you found value in it, make sure you drop me a subscribe so that way you don't miss any future episodes. Happy to do a deep dive into any of these use cases or case studies if you want. Let me know which one resonated with you and I can put that into my content plan. Tune in next time where we'll have another conversation on how you can go from 0 to 1 to growth or traction by leveraging content and being customer obsessed and buyer centric in how you show up and how you go outbound.